You must run one of these 4 part numbers. You can do this, you can do that. There's other, but the verbiage in some spots is so generalized, it's open to your interpretation, and you and I can read the same rule. And we've done this looking at the rule book together just the other day. I understood it one way, you understood it the other. So that right there, I think when they print that 2019 rule book for the racers and the tech officials, it should be the exact same thing, because right now they're not. Should be the exact same thing, and then the verbiage needs to be 100% clear, specific, to the point. There's a lot of spots in there, in each division. I'm not talking just modifieds, specifically modifieds, but in each division, there's a lot of things that are so broad to interpretation.
I think on that, though, is they want to leave some parts open for interpretation, so it gives you a little more play. But I've read parts where it's like, you can use these 4 part numbers, you can't use these.
Right.
And that's
but
pretty
then
good.
There's that broad statement.
And then
perfect example, not the Speed Week this year, but Speed Week last year. Perfect example is the conversation we had last year with Curtis Towns.
And the caliper.
And the brake caliper. Now, he went in, read the rules, this is what it is, goes into Speedway magazine, and orders a caliper. Okay, assuming that he ordered the right part, based upon what he read, finishes, I think it was 2nd or 3rd at Grove, gets teched, and the caliper's illegal. Now, we know Curtis Towns is not a cheater.
No.
But that just kind of goes to show you, okay, we need to clear this verbiage up.
Mm-hmm. If you're going to, I think in the reading some of the rule book that I've read, if you're talking about a specific part, then you need to have the part number specific for those parts and leave out these aren't accepted. Just put...
I think, yes, that would be the simplest way to make that book accurate for everybody to be on the same page. You're right.
Yeah.
Here's the part numbers we're going to allow. Here's our brake section. Mm-hmm. These are the part numbers on the calipers you're allowed to run. Mm-hmm. Okay. Here's what you can run for, steering box. These part numbers, you can get it from this distributor or whatever. I think you're right. Just talk about what is allowed. Yeah. If it's not in there,
it's not allowed.
Exactly.
That clears out. I read that part number in that section.
Right.
Oh, it was the illegal one.
Right. There's a lot of things in there that can confuse a guy.
Mm-hmm. I think as far as watching racing over the years, as I have, because I used to watch like a lot of Grand National, a lot of stock car stuff back when I really didn't know what racing was all about, dirt track.
When you were a fan and then you weren't in the game.
So any division that comes along and starts off and then kind of goes boom is, as I've watched it over the years, it gets expensive because that finding speed and tweaking it within the rules
is not cheap.
And that's where everything does start getting expensive. Mm-hmm. I mean, when we were talking about putting a modified together, I really was looking at GRTs and Shaws, and I was like, damn, I can't afford that
when
roller.
You start looking at a roller, just the cost of a roller, that's before you start getting the big stuff. I mean.
So I was like, we're going to back this down, probably find something used. So I think that's going to happen. Where I think IMCA's tried to curve that a lot is with the other divisions like the sport mods. But you're going to, you'll probably see sport mods where it gets to a point where it's crazy. I mean, right off Longhorn, I talked to Joel and I was like, what's a sport mod running, And he was like, well, they haven't even really started building them yet. So,
well, they're in that process,
and they're in that process now because that division's picking up. But I mean, that you go look at a Longhorn, and it's basically a late model in the back. Then you go look at a GRT, and it's basically a late model in the back. You know what I mean?
You're right, and
that technology is going to get expensive.
It absolutely is. Now let's kind of now that we've talked about that. Okay, there's that side. Okay, there's also let's go back even 15, 16 years. Let's talk Willamette Speedway just for a minute.
Okay.
Let's talk Willamette Speedway when we had the open comp rules. Okay.
Run what you brung.
It was pretty much all the rules for that one class took up a quarter of a sheet of one side of a paper. Okay, that all the rules.
And how many fights were in the pits back then?
But if you look at that class, okay, you had guys running 410 fuel-injected sprint car engines with 65-inch sideboards. That's 65 inches off the ground. No top wedge noses. Guys, I mean, these were they were 100% outlaw late model type cars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Those cars back then, I'm talking 15 years ago, those guys were spending so much money that it's not far off what guys are spending today on what we call the national scene. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But because of the limited amount of rules, no sprint car wings, no nitrous, car had to weigh 2,000 pounds, no radios, no mirrors, body could be 83 inches wide. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
We saw a field of 16. At that time, we ran 16 cars in the feature. Even the guys that didn't have a lot of money, because the rules were so open, were every bit as fast as most of the guys with the big-time cars. We had 16 cars in the feature, and you didn't know who was going to win the feature. Now, these guys are spending, maybe just a little more than they were back then on true late model style cars.
No,
because
they're spending a lot more than
in shocks, yes, but I mean overall, you don't see guys running 410 fuel injected sprint car engines with injection and all the other expense that came with that. But you didn't know who was going to win the feature. Now the rules are so tight, everybody has to run this, and this. It's tightened everything up. But you've got those guys that are able to outdollar, and I'm not saying that they're not talented, but now you've got an idea of the 20 cars on the track, which one of the 5 we're going to see win. You see what I'm saying? I think having an open set of rules, my point to this, makes everything
equal in the end because guys,
at least more competitive.
Well,
at least more competitive.
You're wanting people to use their ingenuity to get fast.
I love that about racing.
Instead of going and buying that $2,000 shock.
Well, and because there's guys that can't afford that $2,000 shock that could use another part.
And I'm not saying a shock's $2,000. I was just
they are.
I know
they are.
I
but
know.
There's Dom.
Well, let me tell you, and this is not talking about dirt track racing, but circle track racing.
Uh-huh.
When Rod Mack used to run the asphalt late model, they were a bucks down racer, basically open motor, nothing special, and they would win. Okay, because they spent time. That was their passion. They spent the time on it to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they weren't one of the store-bought assembled cars. That's all there was to it. There's a lot of thought that goes into a lot of things. And I tend to agree with what you're saying because, I mean, there's certain people that go out the track, street stocks, anything, that have a lot of special stuff that's within the rules.
Right.
Took a lot of thinking and a lot of research to do, and they will go out there and win every time they decide to go race.
Right. I remember watching those open rules where everybody, it just seemed, and I think it really was, more competitive from the top to the bottom of the field. And that was with an invert, like we're back to now for the late models anyway. A full invert, fast qualifier to the back of the pack. I love that.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Okay, so
but
go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you, but
sorry.
since we've started that invert, back to what we used to have, fans wanted it, drivers wanted it, everybody was for it. Since then, we've watched every winner come off the back row.
Mm-hmm.
So, at this point, it doesn't matter where you start.
No.
Because of the way the rules are. The faster guys are still going to be in the back. They're going to make their way to the front. That's how it was back then, too. We saw a lot of champions come in the back.
But who hung tough and finished third last Saturday night?
In the late models?
Yeah.
Our third place car?
Yeah.
Was... Who was it?
Let me go to my results and tell you.
Edward Waldrop. Ed jumps in and says, prices today is what makes a lot of race cars less competitive, and I agree with that. I wish IMCA was a little bit more like the USRA. Do you remember those USRA rules we had before the IMCA sanction came in? It was great racing in the modifieds. Not that it's not now. And there's going to be some guys that disagree with me. That's fine. But, having those USRA rules, a lot of guys were all about that. Again, I like what the IMCA concept. It was. You're right. It was Brian Smith who finished third.
He started where?
He started on the front row.
And they had to run him down.
They had to run him down. That's right. He had a huge lead.
Yeah.
He had a huge lead, and then the two guys that ran him down came from deep in the field. And it was a great race. But I just wish that, this all started from an IMCA conversation.
Sure.
Talking about rule book interpretation.
Okay.
Now, Dom, you and I have sat down together
Oh, yeah.
and looked at the IMCA modified rule book, and we were talking about before you got here how there are certain things in the rule book that are so specific, it's easy to understand. Certain things that say you can't do this, you can't use this part number, you can use this part number.
Right.
But then there's statements in there in the rules that are so generalized, it'd be easy for a guy to get a wrong part or misinterpret that rule.
And it doesn't matter what you're running, whether it's IMCA or I was just going to say NHRA or as Bonneville when I used to run there,
right.
the SCTA. Those rules, they have very specific guidelines for certain things. The other ones are basically, if somebody's going to dispute you, you can say, oh, look, it's a gray area.
Right.
If you want to push the envelope, do it, but be prepared for a dispute.
Right.
That's basically,
and that's great. I'm not against that. But when it comes to the IMCA, we're talking about IMCA modifieds specifically, not sport mods, but just specifically modifieds, or even the rule book. There are so many things where they put part numbers in that you can use, and then below that be part numbers you can't use. Sam had a great idea. So just leave the part numbers out that you can't use and put in what you can. Simplifies the rule book, and everybody is on the same page.
Well, it does, but then it takes away anybody's ingenuity or thoughts that they had. So
IMCA has done a great job of that
they
already.
Actually did.
It is. I mean, they've taken all ingenuity out of dirt modified racing.
I mean, I see your point to it, but in the same token, just what you were saying, that guy can't put this or can't try something different, or you've seen cantilever shocks. People have done things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
the Rayburns.
It takes a lot of that away from stuff. So I don't know. That's just an opinion, though.
I think overall they're trying to keep the cost of racing down, but like I said, that rear geometry on those cars, that's going to start costing you money, and that's where you're going to get a lot of your speed is those manufacturers tweaking those rear ends just enough. I've talked to Joel enough where
and every
this is a little
part,
different, this is a little different, and
right.
those two Bar S cars, Dustin's car is nothing like like Justin's car right now,
but they're the same chassis,
and they're brand new,
right? And then every little part, every time you save a little bit of weight, it costs a little more money. It's a little less rotating weight. The car works better. It's just the cost of racing in general. I don't care what class you're running, is getting completely out of hand. Making a set of rules, Joey Cannon says, let's talk about OEM spindles on street stocks. I've seen a few that don't run OEM spindles, and I'm pretty sure that's against the rules, but is not enforced. He says if rules aren't enforced, why have them at all? And that's another discussion.
Right.
That's another discussion, but he is absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it on everything out there. I mean, everybody's got a little something different, a little something that's maybe a little bit bending it. But everybody's probably saying, what harm's going to be done in a spindle? But do you realize how much geometry can be brought out of a aftermarket spindle?
Yes.
How much strength, how much different disadvantage you'd have with the stock one compared to what these people might be putting on the car.
So many angles.
He's very right.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many angles you can change and make that race car work better just by a spindle.
Yeah, a degree here, a degree there, it's all going to add up.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Chris Frisbee says, you can change all you want in modifieds. You will still see Colin, John, Bryson, Gray, and Dustin still win races. Don't count out Jesse. Don't count out Dotson and Laney and Sawyer
Nick,
and Hogue and Nick Trenchard.
Who just won up it.
Right. I mean, and he's right. Rules, but if everybody's more on the same page, I don't think you'll see 1, 2, 3, or 4 guys completely dominate. Remember the old...
But just like I said a couple weeks ago, you're going through a rotation right now.
We are. We're seeing that.
These guys aren't coming out being bad fast right off the bat and just smoking everybody.
Well,
it's 2 weeks.
Pump the brakes.
2-3 weeks, and then all of a sudden it's somebody else.
Yeah, it was Colin. Came out of the box just like he was in midseason form. Had 4 wins. Bang, 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 bang. Okay? I don't know what happened. Slipped off a little bit. Then here comes Dutson Katie. Bang, 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 bang. There's 4 wins. Bryson sweeps the weekend this last weekend. He's got, 4 or 5 wins in modifieds this year. I mean, you're right. There is a rotation, and it's weird how it works for one driver in a certain part of the year, the next driver, and it's not like
it's never
Colin
the same
wins,
time.
Bryson wins, Campos wins. You know, it's not like a new winner every week. Now, back it up to 2012. 2012 at Willamette